Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons and the ebb and flow of how people bring, specifically how players and dungeon masters ebb and flow out of their seats in a physical table game where people are playing with people locally, and how it impacts campaigns, how it impacts friendships, how it impacts our personal lives, and how Dungeons and Dragons very much really reshapes the lives of those who play it. All right, let's talk about it. All right, so I recently entered into a new game with friends. It's really interesting Dungeons and Dragons game. It's a physical table game, and it is with people I've been playing with for quite a while. But some of my friends are out, and some of my friends are in. And there have been requests to bring others in, and those requests have been denied, right? And there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of preference, there's a lot of profundity about how people fill the seats at their table. Okay, now again, we're talking about the physical table game, right? And the reason why I take the time to talk about that is it is the highest form of the game, because it links friendship in a very real and tactile way, to the game. It's not just, hey, here's a person in Texas, here's a person in New York, and they talk by Skype every few weeks, but there's a very hard limit on their friendship because they literally can't spend any time together. They can't even get a cup of coffee together, right? Streaming is the future of the game, but the table game will always remain as a clarion call to those who want to play the game the way Gary played the game, and in this really special way that offers a higher level of reward. All right, so let's jump into it. So one of the things that's really fascinating is I've just watched. So we had one player bounce out because that player was increasing their education, and so that player is out of the game because they're doing a very good thing in their lives. They're increasing the amount of time they are local, or they're still there, but they just don't have the ability to sit for 4 hours at a game table, once a week and play. And the reason why is they need to be studying, right? So there you have somebody pulling away from the table, not because they're disappointed with anybody at the table, not because they're disappointed with the game, but because a life goal has called them called them away from the table. That's very real. It's very needed, and I think it's important for us all to talk about this. Dungeon masters and players should applaud that. There are absolutely times where, as a dungeon master or a player, you should be ready to say, you should not be at this table, or I'm glad you chose to not be at this table anymore. That is a very important, very real, very distinct choice, and I think it's really important that we as players celebrate that when it happens. We all mourn the loss of the player at the table, but if they're pushing their lives forward, that can be a very, very wise, very mature, very necessary decision. Okay, and we really need to think about, and believe it or not, I've never seen that addressed in any tabletop role-playing game book, and I've read hundreds of them, about celebrating when a player is stepping away for the right reasons, right? And that could go a lot further, right? What if a person suddenly is a parent? That could be a very good reason to step back and really reduce the amount of gaming that is being done, so they could support, so they could be there more, supporting in any way possible the other person involved in the life of that child. That could be really, really important, right? And I think we really need to think as dungeon masters and players how that maps. All right, I'd love to see that addressed in 6th edition. That'd be a great topic to bring up within the Dungeon Master Guide of 6th edition, right? So we had another one where someone moved, right? They physically moved away, and there was some friction because once the person had physically moved away, there was a request from that person that everybody else in the group came to where they were now. And everybody in the group was like, we miss you, bye. Like, it didn't go down that way. And that could be really tough. That could really, really be tough. But life events are very, very real, and they can really impact a game quite a bit. And so that's just another reason why we saw, people, flowing, ebbing in and out. And actually, I think that's one of the biggest things I'm thinking about with this too, is all of these life events are triggers, right? I'll throw it out. Here's the thing that I've seen people that have pulled people away from the table, or increase somebody's availability for the table. Here we go. Children, education, divorce, death of a loved one or friend, death of someone within their circle, within their known circle of people. It's a big one. That could pull somebody out, or it could push them to the game, one or the other. So you have all these life events, and they are bringing people in and out, okay? Now, all that is for the player seats, right? Everything we just talked about, that is all player specific. It can impact the game master, and actually all of those can impact the game master, but the game master has its own unique facets. So one of the things that's really interesting is players leveling up to game masters burning out, or usurpation of the game master seat. So I've seen every single one of these. So we level up is the best, of course. When you see a player level up to the game master slot, the dungeon master slot, that's really, really exciting. It's really wonderful, actually. Everybody in the hobby should be celebrating that, because this is a tough hobby, and it's a tough hobby to get new people involved in. And so it's really critical that we celebrate these successes. So that does happen. Dungeon Masters burning out. There is absolutely no excuse for this, and yet it happens all the time. So one of the things is, despite there just being an absolute mountain of information for how to GM, one of the problems is there's not a lot of consensus within that mountain of information. And so one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is they write an entire notebook's worth of adventure, which is going to take 2.5 years, and then they run 8 months of it, and then they get burned out. I've seen this so many times. I've seen people who have YouTube channels with 100,000 views, with probably 80, 90,000 views, who are supposed to be like top-notch dungeon masters, and have ongoing campaigns that were so like grindy and like going nowhere and not resolving, and stories just going on forever. Rather than run a campaign, celebrate the end of it, start up a new campaign. That's the way to go. Campaigns should be 3 to 7 sessions long. These week-long, month-long, year-long things, these are fantasies. That's double fantasy. When people are doing that, they're playing Dungeons & Dragons, a fantasy game, and they're also playing this game, the fantasy game of my 2.5 years of notes in my notebook are all going to get played exactly the way I want it, right? Like I'm writing a novel. That's an extra fantasy, and there are so many players that do this, and they can get burnt out because they get sick of their own content, right? Or they can get burnt out because their players get sick of their content, and then the players get really, really antsy at the table and start doing a lot of Leroy Jenkins and all kinds of crazy nonsense at the table because they're frustrated. They don't know where to go with it. All right? So you have all that. In addition, usurpation of the Dungeon Master role. This is really an interesting one. This happens quite a bit, where you have players who are sitting in the player seat, and the dungeon masters are taking for granted their position, and somebody's coming up and they're like, I can do a better job than that person. And so you can see internal coups that occur within Dungeons & Dragons games, where players will go, hey, I'm thinking about running on my own game. It's going to be at my house, same night, same bat time, but different bat channel. You can see schisms and sects, S-E-C-T, that happen within groups. It's pretty crazy. So there's a lot that happens with the ebb and flow of players in and out of the game master, in and out of the dungeon master, and in and out of the player seat. I think one of the important parts for us to remember as dungeon masters and as players is celebrate those successes. So when somebody steps away from the table for a good reason, do not like put your game over your desire to have that person in your game over your desire to see that person grow as a person, mature as a person, and do well for them and those who care for them. That can be incredibly dangerous, and you don't want to be in that position. So be careful of that. And then also watch for players who are leveling up to that dungeon master slot, and be very careful. I've done this myself. Know when it's time for you to give up your own seat. That's tricky. It's very tricky, and you should be ready for it. It takes some selflessness, it takes some courage, and it takes some humility. But it's important. And if our hobby is going to grow, if we're going to get to that next level, if we're going to really make Dungeons & Dragons community and Dungeons & Dragons game greater than Gary Gax started it as, that's what we're going to need to do. All that is my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion on this topic. Please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful, wonderful millennium.